I'm back at the beehives. Today I want to see if the bees are building at all in their new frames with the undrawn comb. See if they're doing any building at all, because I know that they were expecting a population boom when I last checked them, and I want to see if they're expanding at all. I also want to check for any signs of varroa mites, because my friend who also has bees at this location did have some earlier this year. That was before my nukes came in, but I just want to check on that. And in general, I just want to see how the bees are doing. In this first hive, I'm not seeing any expansion beyond the nuke frames. So these plastic frames on either side are not being drawn out at all with new comb. That said, they're still not really filling the 4 that they originally came on. So I guess they still just don't need the space. I'm just going to keep an eye on it and see if they eventually will draw on the comb. Sometimes bees are very specific about the kind of frames that they like. I'm hoping that they do okay with these plastic ones, but we'll see. I just noticed something and I wanted to point it out. There are a lot of bees on this particular empty frame, and that is their work. They are starting to draw out the comb. There are a lot of bees on this frame, and they are also starting to pack the edges with burr comb. They're definitely doing some work on here. So it's just starting, but these bees are actually starting to do a tiny bit of drawing on the new frames, which is a good sign. That's about it for today's bees. There's still lots of babies, eggs, larvae in there. There are changes happening. It's just really slow, but it's amazing to see it happening. And I'll probably be back in another week and a half or 2 weeks to see how things are progressing. So it's actually the day after that hive inspection, and because it was such a short one, I thought I would actually talk a little bit about, for the people who don't know, about why I've chosen to leave Toronto and come and live here on the Soggy and Bruce Peninsula, and why I have bees in the first place. So I grew up in Toronto. I lived there until I was 16, and then when I was 16, I moved to Stratford, Ontario, which was a really big change at the time, going from a huge city to a smaller town. And I spent a couple of years in Stratford, and then I moved back to Toronto, and I was there for maybe 13 or 14 years. But every summer for the last 8 or 9 years, I have been working on a farm for a couple weeks every summer. Yeah, and every time I would come back from being on the farm and being in nature and hiking and swimming and gardening and being a really kind of different version of myself, where I was a lot more fearless and a lot less judgmental of myself and others, I would come back to the city and I would have this feeling almost of deprivation. Like there was something that I was really grieving when I came back to the city, something I was losing that I just wasn't in touch with in Toronto. The older I got, the more intense that feeling became, to the point that I started to feel like I didn't really want to live with it anymore, and I wanted to figure out a way where I could live in a greener place and connect with parts of myself that I was missing in the city. So yeah, I was feeling like I didn't want to experience this feeling of deprivation anymore, and I was kind of wondering why I was okay with feeling this way. And I guess partly I was kind of accepting this idea that going somewhere green and connecting with nature is a vacation, and being in the city is real life. And then I was thinking, well, why am I accepting that as reality when I could flip the script and live this life connected with nature, and it doesn't have to be a vacation. So I decided to move to the Soggy and Bruce last year with my husband, and It was a huge change. We moved from, you know, one of the biggest cities in North America to a town of 500 people. And that was a huge change. It still is a really big change for us. And I left behind a lot of things. I left behind some good friends, some family members. I left behind work that I absolutely loved and that fulfilled me so much. That was maybe the hardest thing because, you know, friends can visit, you can talk on the phone, but I left a job that I really loved that sort of fed my soul. And so there was like an element of giving something up that I loved for something else that I felt would really feed me. So that hasn't even touched on bees yet. I've been really interested in bees for a long time. I wrote an article for a magazine a few years ago, and I ended up talking with a bunch of big names in the Ontario beekeeping world, and that really sparked my interest. And I ended up taking a course in the early days of the pandemic. It was supposed to be in person. I couldn't go to an in-person course, so I took a course through David Burns, who, if you don't know about him, he's an amazing, experienced beekeeper who has a YouTube presence, and he runs these courses. And I just really felt like I wanted to do something with bees. I visited an apiary a few years ago, actually on the Saugeen Bruce Peninsula, and I remember standing among all these bees, and I could feel their buzzing resonating in my body, like physically. And it's, I think, the closest thing I've ever had to a spiritual experience, because I'm just pretty atheistic. But I just knew that somehow I wanted to do some beekeeping. This is a way for me to sort of dive in and get some experience and learn and observe. I'm not very concerned about getting honey. I just want to see my bees do well. And honestly, when I'm with them, I could just stare at them for hours. I just want to be close to them and watch them and see them live their lives, this incredibly complex system that they have developed, and it's just incredible to see. So that kind of brings me to the hive inspection yesterday, I guess. And I guess I felt like I wanted to talk about this tonight. I just went for a swim by myself as the sun was setting over the lake. And I just kind of felt for the first time since I moved here, I think, I felt connection with that person that I want to be, that I somehow find much more accessible when I'm in a green place. And I feel like there is this idea that you should be okay wherever you are, and yeah, this idea that nature is a vacation is, to me, totally backwards. I am at home among green and growing things, and nurturing those things is what I want to do in my life. And I was just finding that really hard to do in the city. So yeah, here I am. It's been a really hard year. It's been almost exactly a year since I moved here. And it's been a pandemic, so it was going to be a hard year anyway. To move during a pandemic, to feel that sense of isolation on top of the isolation you feel when you move to a new place, it was doubly hard. And I feel like I'm just emerging from the shell shock of the pandemic and moving to a very different place. I still am deeply homesick for Toronto sometimes, and my friends and my grandma and my brother and my job that I left. But I'm learning to be a different version of myself here that I think is going to suit me much better. So I miss you, Toronto, but you're still there, so they say. I haven't gotten back yet, but I'm going to be doubly vaccinated in a few weeks, and then I will be back in the city for a vacation before coming home to the Bruce Peninsula. So, thanks for listening.